Welcome to Twilight Fables, where old tales crawl out of their graves and return in shapes far darker than you remember. Tonight, we whisper of a puppet boy, carved from longing and loneliness, who yearned not just for life, but for love, attention, and the warmth of humanity. Yet the warmth he found did not come from flesh or kindness. It came from something else, something swelling in the hollow of his chest. This is the tale of Pinocchio, the heart that lies. Geppetto was a quiet man who lived at the edge of the village, where the streets gave way to thinning fields and the forest pressed close against the earth. His workshop was always lit, even long after the sun had gone down, spilling golden lantern light through warped shutters into the dark. Inside, the air smelled of pine shavings and varnish, the floor littered with curls of wood that caught the glow like fallen ribbons. He was a man of patience, though loneliness had worn him thin. The village children mocked him sometimes, whispering that the old woodcarver talked to his dolls and that his toys never found homes because they were too real. Their parents bought them anyway. Fine little marionettes, clever dancing animals, whittled whistles. But Geppetto felt the emptiness linger each night when his fire dimmed. It was on one of these nights, during a storm, that he began his most ambitious work. He chose a length of seasoned pine, long and strong, and began to carve. He did not know why his hand shaped it into the form of a boy. Perhaps it was a memory of his youth, or perhaps it was the silence of the room urging him to make something that could fill it. The knife cut smooth and sure, coaxing a face from the wood. Long nose, wide eyes, a mouth curved into a half smile. He worked for days, and soon the puppet had a body, arms, legs, even fingers, detailed with carved lines like tendons. He hollowed out the chest, crafting space inside where a heart might one day beat. When at last it was done, Geppetto set down his knife and whispered into the empty air, "If only you were real, if only you could keep me company." The storm outside groaned like some vast creature, and in the silence that followed, Geppetto swore he heard something inside the puppet's chest. A faint tick, 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 like the creak of wood in a settling house. He shook his head and laughed softly at himself, thinking the late hour was playing tricks. But when he opened his eyes again, the puppet's head had tilted, just slightly, as though listening. Pinocchio's first steps were awkward, stiff jerks, like a marionette with tangled strings. His carved feet clattered against the workshop floor, and his mouth opened on its own with a hollow creak. "Father," the puppet whispered. Geppetto fell to his knees, hands trembling as he touched the wooden face. The puppet blinked, lids scraping faintly as they closed and opened again. Geppetto wept, clutching him. "My boy," he said, though his voice cracked my wooden boy. And so Pinocchio lived. At first, the villagers did not believe it. Children would press against the windows of Geppetto's workshop, wide-eyed, whispering that the puppet walked and spoke. Some cried out in fear, calling him a witch's thing, while others were curious. Geppetto brought him out into the sunlight one day, guiding him gently by the hand. "Say hello," Geppetto encouraged. Pinocchio tried. His wooden lips stretched into a smile, though it looked too fixed, too painted. His voice cracked, as though splinters were caught in his throat. "Hello?" The children drew back. Some laughed nervously, some hid behind their mother's skirts. One boy whispered, "He doesn't look right." Another said, "His eyes don't blink like ours." Pinocchio lowered his head. He could feel something inside his hollow chest. Not pain, exactly, but a coldness, a distance. That night, by the fire, Geppetto held his hand. "They'll come to love you, Pinocchio. You only need to be kind. Do not lie, my boy. Lies will rot your soul. Promise me." "I promise," Pinocchio whispered, though he did not fully understand. The first lie came by accident. Days later, he found himself among a group of children near the village square. They circled him with curious stares, whispering and pointing. He felt their suspicion, like a weight pressing down on him. He wanted, more than anything, for them to smile at him. One child asked, "Do you even eat food? Or do you drink varnish like wood?" They laughed. Pinocchio's jaw tightened. His wooden hands clenched at his sides. "Yes," he said quickly, "I eat food. I have a bird at home, a little sparrow that I feed crumbs to." The laughter faltered. The children glanced at one another. "You do?" one asked, half skeptical, half intrigued. "Yes," Pinocchio said again, forcing his painted smile wider. "A beautiful bird. It sings to me every morning." The children leaned closer, curiosity overcoming their fear, and in that moment, Pinocchio felt it, a warmth blooming inside his chest, faint but undeniable. His hollow rib cage seemed to tremble, and there was a sound, soft and deep, thump. His heart, which had always been carved wood, gave a living beat. Pinocchio froze, then looked at their faces, not laughing, not mocking, but listening. The warmth spread, and for the first time, he felt alive. That night, he told Geppetto about the children. They asked if I was like them. I told them I have a bird. Geppetto frowned. "But you do not." "I know," Pinocchio whispered, touching his chest. The warmth lingered there, but when I said it, I felt something here, like I was real. Geppetto's face darkened. "Pinocchio, no, do not lie. Lies are poison. They may feel sweet at first, but they rot you from within. Promise me again, no more lies." Pinocchio lowered his eyes. "I promise." But in the hollow of his chest, the warmth pulsed softly, calling him back. The second lie came soon after. The children were gathered again, asking him to speak. Some still eyed him with unease. but others leaned forward, waiting. Pinocchio felt the pressure building, the memory of warmth just out of reach. "I saw a fairy once," he said suddenly. "She had wings like glass and hair that shimmered like the moon." The children gasped. A few laughed, but none walked away. "What did she say to you?" one asked. Pinocchio smiled wider. "She told me I was special. She told me one day I would be a real boy." The warmth in his chest surged, stronger this time, pressing against his ribs, making his whole body tremble. Thump, thump. His painted eyes glistened in the sunlight, and for a moment the children seemed spellbound. Even when they doubted, they stayed close, and Pinocchio, basking in their attention, thought, "If one lie made me feel alive, what would 100 do?" And so the puppet learned the sweetest lesson, not of honesty, nor of love, but of the addictive power of lies. And with each beat of his swelling heart, he took another step away from the boy Geppetto had hoped he would be. The warmth in Pinocchio's chest became his secret treasure. By day, he followed Geppetto into the village, his wooden limbs creaking, his smile painted too wide, and he endured the suspicious stares of strangers. But by evening, when the other children gathered, he felt alive. It began small, with whispers about the fairy. They would ask him, what did she look like? What did she say? Pinocchio would tell them, spinning the image larger each time. At first, wings like glass, hair like the moon. Then, her voice could heal wounds. Then, her touch could lift you into the sky. And every time their eyes grew wider, the warmth inside him swelled. Geppetto noticed first. One night, the old man laid his ear to Pinocchio's chest as the puppet rested by the fire. "Strange," he muttered. "You sound like a clock, and yet not quite. Thudding." Pinocchio smiled faintly. "It is my heart, Father. I think it is becoming real." Geppetto stiffened. "You cannot force such things, my boy. To be real is to live with truth, not falsehood." "But when I tell the truth, they look at me with fear," Pinocchio whispered. "When I lie, they look at me with love." Geppetto's hands trembled as he stroked the puppet's cheek. Love bought with lies is no love at all. Yet Pinocchio only heard the echo of the beating inside his ribs, and he longed for it to grow louder. The next lie came during a lazy summer afternoon. The children had gathered near the fountain in the square, where the sun glittered off the water. They clamoured for Pinocchio to tell them more. Some sat cross-legged at his feet, others perched on the stone lip of the fountain. Their faces were open, eager, a circle of devotion around a boy who was not a boy. Pinocchio paused, then leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you know, I once had a friend, a cricket that talked." A ripple of laughter swept through them. "A cricket," one boy scoffed. "Yes," Pinocchio said, nodding firmly. "Small, with a voice so loud it filled a room. He gave me advice, like a wise old man in tiny clothes. He told me to always listen, to always do what is right. The children leaned in, some smiling, some still doubting. "And what happened to him?" a girl asked. Pinocchio's mouth curled wider, his carved lips creaking. "I crushed him beneath my foot when he became annoying." Gasps rippled through the group. For a heartbeat, they stared, wide-eyed, caught between horror and delight at the gruesomeness of it. And then they laughed, nervous at first, then louder, chasing the chill away. Pinocchio's chest burned with warmth, his heart hammering so hard his wooden ribs ached. Thump, thump, thump. He touched his chest and swore he felt something pressing outward, something that should not fit inside his hollow frame. But oh, how alive he felt! The lies came faster after that. In the evenings, he spun great tales. He told them how he had once been swallowed whole by a whale, so vast that its belly was a cathedral of ribs and darkness. It stank of salt and rot, Pinocchio said, pacing before the wide-eyed children, and in its stomach floated whole ships, their sails torn, their sailors crying out in the black water. I lit a fire inside it and made it sneeze me out. The children clapped, some squealed, others covered their mouths in delighted terror. Their eyes shone with awe, not the fear they once had for the puppet boy, but admiration. Pinocchio's heart roared in his chest at their laughter. He staggered slightly, clutching his ribs as if something inside were splitting. The warmth was so fierce now, it bordered on pain. "You're the bravest of us all," one boy whispered, "braver than any real boy." The words struck Pinocchio like lightning. Braver, better, more. His wooden grin stretched until it felt carved into his face. But Geppetto saw the change. At night, when the boy returned home from his storytelling, his body creaked strangely. The seams between his planks strained. Sometimes his shirt would bulge oddly at the chest, as though something beneath pressed outward. Geppetto confronted him by the fire again. "My son, you are changing. These stories, they are not truth. They will not make you real. They will only destroy you." But Pinocchio only smiled, his eyes glassy with feverish joy. "You don't understand. Every lie makes me feel it. I am becoming human. I can feel the heart growing, Father. Isn't that what you wanted?" Geppetto grasped his wooden shoulders. "Not like this. Never like this." But the boy no longer listened. Soon the children begged for tales every day. Pinocchio obliged, spinning lies with abandon. He claimed he had fought pirates. He swore he had seen kings bow before him. He told them he had once flown on wings of fire and commanded storms with his voice. Each lie fed the monstrous thing within. The warmth now pounded so violently it shook him. His chest groaned, the seams straining. Sometimes, when no one was looking, he lifted his shirt and saw the wood trembling, as if something inside it were trying to escape. But he didn't care. The children cheered his name, crowded close, hung on every word. For the first time he was adored, and in his mind only one thought remained. If lies bring me this far, then one day, with enough of them, I will be real. But Geppetto, watching the way the boy's frame bowed under invisible pressure, whispered to himself in terror, "No, with enough of them, you will break." The town had learned to avoid the boy, not out of cruelty, but because Pinocchio had become something strange, something that made the air shiver when he walked past. Children who once crowded around him now kept their distance, whispering to one another when he told them stories. Some still came, drawn by his voice, but others fled before he could begin. Pinocchio noticed none of this. To him, the crowd was all that mattered. Their attention was the breath he lived on, and every lie he told gave him more. He began to lie constantly, day and night. The first wishtiest lie of that season was small. He told a child that he had once walked barefoot through fire without pain. The child stared at him in awe, repeating the claim to another. Pinocchio felt the warmth in his chest swell again. It was no longer soft or curious. It was persistent, burning, aching. Soon the lies grew larger. He told them he had been the captain of a ship that sailed beneath the moon, that he had wrestled wolves taller than houses, that he had dined with kings in cities carved of crystal. Each tale was taller than the last. Each met with gasps, laughter, disbelief, or terror. The children clung to him. Even when they doubted him, they gathered to hear what he would say next. Geppetto watched this with a growing dread. At night, he would stand by the workshop doorway, listening to the creak of Pinocchio's voice, telling yet another story to whoever would listen. When the boy returned home, Geppetto would see the change in him. His chest seemed to rise and swell under his shirt, as if something inside fought to escape. The seams of his wooden frame creaked with unnatural strain. One evening, Geppetto stepped forward. "Pinocchio," he said, voice weary and trembling, "you must stop. You are becoming something else. Lies will not make you real. They will rot you. Stop before it is too late." Pinocchio looked at him, his painted grin wider than ever. "Do you see the way they look at me, father? They listen. They remember. I am no longer a puppet in their eyes. I am real. Every word I speak, every story I tell, makes me more human. My heart," he touched the centre of his chest, where the wood was swollen beneath his shirt. "It proves it." Geppetto's lips pressed thin. "Your heart is not proof, Pinocchio. It is warning." But Pinocchio did not hear him. He had begun to crave the heat in his chest, the beating that had become an obsession. He began lying without thought, even when no one asked him to. The children followed him to the square daily, waiting for him to speak. Some still kept their distance, but others stayed near, hungry for stories. Pinocchio gave them stories like breath, spinning tall tales of kingdoms and monsters, of cities built on clouds, of seas turned to gold under a new dawn. The lies were his sustenance. Each one drove the warmth in his chest into something heavier, larger. It pressed outward so fiercely now that the seams of his wooden frame groaned in protest. The painted skin of his face cracked slightly when he smiled. His eyes began to look too deep, too knowing. Even the children noticed, though they never said it aloud. One afternoon, a girl with a basket of berries asked him quietly, "Pinocchio, what happens when you run out of lies?" He did not answer at once. He looked down at his chest, where the swelling pulsed beneath his shirt. "Then I will have to make them," he said softly, almost to himself, "because the heart will not stop. It will not be quiet." Geppetto saw it growing worse. He tried again to pull Pinocchio aside one evening as the boy returned from the square, his arms filled with gifts the children had brought him, carved trinkets, scraps of cloth, ribbons. "You must promise me," Geppetto said urgently. "Stop telling them, stop feeding it." But Pinocchio laughed quietly, a sound that creaked like dry wood. "You do not understand, father. Lies are my life. Lies make me real, and I will not stop." By the end of that week, the swelling in his chest was grotesque. His shirt strained at the seams, and the wood of his torso bulged in unnatural places. At night, Geppetto could hear it, thudding, thumping, like the beating of a drum. One morning, the children gathered before him, insisting he tell them the greatest story he had ever made. Pinocchio stepped forward, feeling the pressure of their eyes upon him. His chest burned like fire. His lips trembled with want. "I will tell you," he said softly, "but you must promise to listen, for this is the last and truest of them all." They nodded eagerly, drawing close. Even those who feared him stood nearer now, unable to turn away. He began to speak. His voice was low and steady, drawing them in like a tide. "Long ago, I was made by an old man who loved me. He carved me with care, and I was but wood. But I wished to be real. I wished to be like you. And so I began to tell lies. Little lies at first, but then they grew, and so did my heart. Every lie was a brick, every tale a breath, every word a flame that made me more than wood. I have told you about fairies, about crickets, about whales and kingdoms, because they were mine to tell. But the greatest truth I will tell you now is this." His voice rose, trembling with something between triumph and madness. "I am real." The words rang out over the square. The children fell silent, staring at him. His chest bulged violently beneath his shirt. He placed a hand over it, and the seam split with a loud crack. Something inside him roared. Geppetto came running, clutching a lantern, his voice breaking. "Pinocchio, "Stop, please." But the boy did not hear him. The warmth had become agony, and the beating inside him was deafening. "I am real," he screamed again, louder over and over, his wooden fingers clawing at his chest. "I am real. I am real." Then it happened, with a sound like splintering wood and tearing cloth. His chest burst open, light, and a cloud of fine sawdust spilled into the air, and the boy fell silent. The crowd gasped and stumbled back. Geppetto fell to his knees beside him, clutching the still, broken figure of his son. Pinocchio smiled once more, his painted grin fixed in place. "I'm real," he whispered, even as the warmth drained from his body. And then he was still. The children would not speak of it again, but in the quiet of the night, some said they could still hear a wooden heartbeat, faint and distant, beating somewhere in the dark.